This happened about a year ago, and honestly, even now, I still can't fully feel at ease when I have to drive alone. At night, I change the names of the people involved, but everything else is exactly as it happened. I was living in Provo at the time with my husband. He was in law school, his schedule was packed, and we rarely had any real time together. I planned to drive back to Boise to spend the weekend with my family, something I hadn't done in a long time, because I made dinner for my husband first, before leaving. I didn't get on the road until around 11 at night. It was too late to stop by and chat with my friends at BYU, so I went straight on to I-15 and then I-84, heading toward Boise. If you've ever taken that route at night, you know exactly what I mean. The road feels like another world, a darkness so deep, the horizon seems to disappear, a silence so heavy, it feels like even the air refuses to move, and there's no signal for miles after leaving Provo. Headlights from other cars are few and far between, and once you pass Tremonton, the landscape turns into an empty void with no sign of life. Every kilometer feels like traveling, further and further away from civilization. Around 2 in the morning, I saw something lying on the road in the distance. I thought it was an animal, but its shape was too human. As my car got closer, I realized it was sprawled right across the middle of the road, blocking both lanes. I had no choice but to brake and stop. I cracked my door open a little and shouted, "Hello? Are you okay?" No answer. The car's headlights lit up the object, but I still couldn't be sure. I finally got out, walking toward it slowly, holding my phone in my hand, even though I knew there was no signal. When I was about 3 meters away, I stopped. The headlights hit the object more clearly, and in that moment, I realized something was very wrong. It wasn't a human body. It was a mannequin, a full-sized adult mannequin, complete with clothes, shoes, and a position so perfect, it mimicked someone who had fainted or been injured. The details were strange. Its synthetic hair was messy. The clothes on it looked like ordinary work clothes, and its hand was stretched out, slightly to the side, as if waiting for someone to come closer. A cold sensation shot up my back, all the way to the nape of my neck. There was no logical reason why a mannequin that large should be there at that hour, in a place that far from anything. I didn't think anymore. I turned around, ran as fast as I could, jumped into my car, slammed the door, and hit the gas as hard as I could. As my car shot forward, I heard something like footsteps approaching, or maybe it was just my own panic pounding in my ears. I didn't look back. I just kept driving. Only when I got near Mountain Home and the signal finally came back did I call my husband's family. My voice was shaking, and they could clearly hear it, but they didn't quite grasp how terrified I was, because the story itself sounded unbelievable. About 45 minutes after my last call, I finally arrived at my husband's family home. The house lights felt like the only thing truly real. After that long, tense drive, I called again. As soon as I pulled into the neighborhood, asking them to come out and help me unload. And honestly, what I needed most was just to see a familiar face, something to convince me that I had really, truly escaped whatever had happened on that dark road. When the car stopped in the driveway and the garage door opened, I felt a small sense of relief. But as I opened my car door, a tiny sound broke the moment, the sound of something dropping onto the concrete floor. Took! Just that. Soft, short, but enough to make me turn. There, right beneath the car door, lay a human finger. For a few seconds, I was completely frozen. My voice vanished. My body refused to move. My eyes were locked on that small object, pale skin, an intact fingernail, and an end that was clearly cut clean. Everything that had happened in the last hour merged into one horrifying realization. I had never stopped since leaving the mannequin, not even once. And that finger was not mine. Realizing what it meant made my whole body feel submerged in ice. Someone The person who placed the mannequin on the road had tried to open my car door as I was escaping. When I slammed the door, in panic, their finger got caught, cut off, and carried with me for dozens of kilometers without me ever knowing. We called the police immediately. They said they would contact all the hospitals near the area where it happened to look for any patient who came in with a severed finger. A few hours later, they found someone who matched and took him into custody. The police didn't give much information about who he was or what his motive might have been. They only said, "He's been secured." Honestly, the part that sticks in my mind the most still isn't the mannequin, not the dark desert, not the panic as I ran back to my car. What's hardest to forget is that tiny sound, "took," when the finger hit the garage floor. Since that night, I always make sure there's something in my car to protect myself, not because I'm paranoid, but because now I know how easily everything can change in just a few seconds on an empty road. That night was supposed to be just like any other weekend. I was 19 years old, confident enough to drive, and foolish enough to look for entertainment by wandering around without a purpose. My two friends, Jeffrey and Derek, were with me, as usual. We didn't have any plans at all, other than leaving the house, starting the engine, and seeing where the night would take us. After a few hours of circling places we had visited far too many times, the boredom started to sink in. From the back seat, Jeffrey suggested that we should go to the lake behind the town's high school. A simple idea, but at that moment, it felt better than driving around with no direction. So I steered the car toward the neighborhoods surrounding the school, then followed the winding road that led us into a darker, more isolated area. As the house lights began to fade away, the road narrowed into a single lane, flanked by thick trees. It felt like leaving the town behind and stepping into a place that didn't exist on any map, even though it was only minutes from the noise and crowds. At the end of that road was a lake with a small dock where people would go fishing, a public area, nothing we were breaking, no rules we were crossing. We got out, sat at the edge of the dock, and let the cold night air settle against our skin. But as always, the calm only lasted for a moment. After a few minutes, Derek grew restless and wanted to look around. We returned to the car without saying much. At that moment, none of us knew that our boredom was about to turn into something far more unsettling. Exiting the parking area, I crossed the road and turned onto a small path that cut away from the main route. There were no houses along that road, no streetlights either. It was dark enough to make you think twice about turning off the engine, but we kept moving slowly, driven more by curiosity than by courage. About 100 meters from the bend, we saw two cars parked on the left side of the road. The one in front looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. Engine off, windows fogged, its body slightly tilted. The car behind it was the complete opposite. Engine running, interior lights on, and its passenger door wide open, as if someone had just stepped out in a hurry. No one in sight, no sound, no movement. "This is weird," Jeffrey muttered. I didn't answer, just stared straight ahead as the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. We agreed to find a place to turn around, so I drove a little further until I saw a bright light from a building at the end of the road. Whatever it was enough to make us feel there was an open area. I turned around and retraced the dark road. As we passed the two cars again, nothing had changed. The passenger door was still open, the lights still on, and there was still no sign of life. We tried to stay calm, but the conversation that usually flowed had turned into an uncomfortable silence. Just a few seconds after passing those cars, something happened. From the windshield, I saw a dim flash of light reflecting at the treetops. The flash was brief, like a reflection, or like someone had just photographed us from behind. Reflexively, I slammed on the brakes. That's when I saw it on one of the large tree branches Right in the middle of the car's headlights, there was a dark figure, sitting and facing us. Its body was small, yet proportionate like a human, but its entire form was just a black silhouette. No facial features, no skin color, nothing I could identify. It just sat there, still, leaning slightly forward, as if observing us from the shadows. The branch it perched on shouldn't have been able to support an adult human's weight, yet the figure didn't move at all. No sign of breathing, no sign of blinking. Bro, what is that? Jeffrey didn't finish his sentence as I slammed the gas pedal with all my strength. The car shot away from that figure, from the two cars, from the entire road that had, without warning, turned into a place we no longer wanted to visit. None of us spoke for several minutes. The sound of the engine and our own breathing was enough to show how tense the atmosphere inside the car had become. Once we returned to the main road, I realized just how tightly I had been gripping the steering wheel. Jeffrey admitted he had seen the figure too. Derek hadn't had a chance to see anything. Since that night, I no longer drive to unfamiliar places at night. Not because I'm afraid of the forest or the dark, but because there was a part of that night that still cannot be explained. And honestly, I have no intention of finding out. I stepped out of work, almost at 1 a.m, much later than usual. The cold November wind made me pull my jacket tighter as I walked toward my car. In the parking lot, brown leaves swirled in the gusts of wind, and it felt like my body was being carried along with the exhaustion from that long shift. My coworker who took over my shift reminded me to take the old highway. The wind on the new road is insane, he said. Seriously, my car almost got thrown. I didn't want to take any risks. I just wanted to go home and sleep. So I followed his advice. As soon as I got into my car and started the engine, the cold in my hands began to fade a little, but the exhaustion that had been piling up since the afternoon still clung to me like a weight on my chest. The old road was always quiet. My car's headlights were the only light, cutting through the darkness of the forest, while the wind made my car sway. Every now and then, I turned on a podcast to keep the silence company. But after almost half an hour, without passing a single car, the sound of the podcast only made my mind even more alert. I kept driving, in that monotonous rhythm, just hoping to get home, without any trouble. When I finally passed through the small town by the coast, the lights from a few buildings that were still on felt like a surprise. Even though most of the shops were already closed, their presence gave a small sense of normalcy. In the parking lot of the old gas station, a place that had always looked shabby since the first time I passed it years ago, there was an old truck with its engine still running. Inside, the silhouette of someone sat completely still, unmoving, lit only by the dim glow from the dashboard lights. It should have been nothing unusual. This was a fishing town, after all, and plenty of people started their day before dawn. But tonight, the presence of that person strangely brought a bit of relief. At least I wasn't the only human still awake on this road. That felt far too quiet. I started to feel sleepy, so I decided to stop for a moment at the small beach that had always been my place to unwind. The gravel parking lot was empty. I rolled down the window slightly, took out a cigarette, and lit it with hands stiff from the cold. The first puff was immediately carried away, torn by the wind, before it could rise properly. I stepped outside for a moment, just to feel the salty sea air, a mix of cold, wet, and sharp. The wind was so strong, it almost took my breath away. But the sensation was enough to make my mind sharper. I couldn't stay outside for long, so I went back into the car, turned on the heater, and let my body sink into the seat. Then a car pulled into the parking lot. Its headlights swept across my car for a moment, before stopping at a fairly distant spot. The engine was turned off, and after that, there was no movement at all. No doors opened, no light from inside the cabin, just the car, in the same thick darkness. It wasn't really unusual. Many people stopped at this beach at night, just to unwind. But something made my stomach feel heavy. Maybe because I was alone. Maybe because the night was too quiet. Or maybe because there was no logical reason for someone to choose a place like this. When the wind was so strong, I tried not to think about it. I smoked the cigarette down to the butt, trying to push away the restless feeling that had no shape. When I started the engine to go home, the red light from the brake lights reflected briefly in my rearview mirror. I thought it was just a trick of the light, until I looked into the side mirror, and my body immediately tensed. There, right next to my car, someone was crouching. Their body was low, almost pressed against the driver's door, as if they had just approached or were waiting for a specific moment. Their sweater was dark, their jeans worn, and their face hidden in shadow. The way they tilted their body, slowly, carefully, made me feel like I was watching a predator ready to strike. Instantly, my whole body moved without thinking. I slammed the gas, and my car jolted backward hard. The rear tires hit the gravel, shattering the silence of the parking lot. The figure jumped to the side, almost falling. My heart felt like it would explode as I shifted into drive. The headlights cut through the darkness and illuminated their face, long enough for me to recognize them. The man from the old truck at the gas station. He looked at me, then turned and ran toward his car, which was the other car that had pulled into the parking lot. I didn't wait to find out anything. I slammed the gas, and the beach immediately receded in my rearview mirror, sinking back into the darkness that made the hair on my neck stand on end. I returned to the main road, my breathing still ragged. There was only one long, winding road along the coast, and if he chased me, I had nowhere to hide. For a few seconds, the rearview mirror showed only darkness. But then, 2 points of light appeared and grew brighter. The headlights of his truck. My stomach sank. I pressed the gas harder, the engine roaring, while my body tensed, holding back fear. The winding road was unforgiving for high speed, but I had no choice, except to keep going. As I passed a sharp turn, the headlights of his truck disappeared for a moment, hidden by the curve of the road. In that brief moment, I saw a small gravel road to the left, almost invisible, if not for the quick reflection of my headlights. Instinct took over. I swerved hard to the left, almost losing control, but the car managed to enter the small road. The dense trees on both sides immediately blocked the view of the main road. I turned off the lights as quickly as possible and let the car glide slowly until it finally came to a complete stop, a few hundred meters from the entrance of the road. Once the engine was off, the entire world felt submerged in darkness. No light, no shadows, only the sound of the wind creeping through the branches and my own breathing, harsh and too fast. I sat still, waiting, hoping no light was following. 10 minutes passed. 20. Nothing. My hands and feet were still trembling, but my mind slowly returned. I slowly turned back, returning to the main road, making sure there was no vehicle, as far as I could see. The drive home felt like an hour of tension, even though it was only a few minutes. But I finally arrived home. As I turned off the engine, I knew one thing for certain. I would never stop at that beach again, in the middle of the night. Some habits aren't worth the risk you never imagined before. I was still living in Castro Valley at the time, during those long, dragging graduate school days. That week was full of reports and projects, and while my roommates went to a club on Friday night, I chose to stay home. It was almost midnight, when the urge appeared out of nowhere, the desire to see the ocean. There wasn't any emotional moment that triggered it, nothing bothering my mind, just a kind of dullness, asking for new air. I had been to Half Moon Bay a few times, often enough to know the route, rare enough to still feel its calm every time I arrived. The drive was about an hour and a half, not ideal for such a late night, but not impossible either. Besides, the roads were usually quiet. Once it passed 11, the road to the coast was quiet. City lights faded, replaced by dark fields and the shadowy lines of hills. When I finally arrived, it was already past midnight, maybe close to 1. Only then did I realize that the parking area to the beach was locked at night. The metal gate was shut tight, its warning sign clearly visible even in the dim light. I tried following Highway 1 south, hoping there was another access point still open. but the next two stops were also locked. The roads were completely silent that night. No cars had passed since I left the town center. Climbing a little farther, I found an empty patch of dirt on the hillside, wide enough to pull over. From there, I could see the coastline far below. I stepped out of the car and walked down the slope, trying to look for a path that might lead closer to the beach. After about 30 feet, my steps started to feel misdirected. Thorny bushes filled the area, dense and hard to push through. In the dark, their thorns were almost invisible, only felt when they suddenly scraped my arm or the side of my body. Every step required a guess, and the farther I moved, the more it felt unreasonable to force my way down, just to walk on the sand. In the middle of the night, I paused for a moment, listening to the distant sound of the ocean, then decided to head back up the hill. It wasn't worth the scratches or the risk of getting lost, just for a moment of spontaneity. As soon as I reached the top of the hill, I saw something that made me stop immediately. In that empty patch of dirt, facing directly toward my car, there was another vehicle that hadn't been there before. The vehicle's dashboard lights glowed faintly, just enough to reveal the silhouette of its driver, a short-haired man, a face with no striking expression. Nothing about his appearance looked unusual, not until I saw the way he was staring at my car. That stare didn't move, not merely curious, but intense, in a way that was hard to explain, as if he was waiting for someone to return, as if my car was something he had been watching for a long time. Instinctively, I ducked. The ground around me was covered in wild grass and low shrubs, just enough to hide my body if I pressed myself close to the earth. From my slightly higher position on the slope, I could watch him without being seen. The man stayed completely still in his seat, not turning his head, not glancing toward the road. His focus was fixed on one thing, my car. And that made the whole situation feel far more wrong than before. There is a certain kind of calm that makes the body react. Not the calm that soothes you, but the kind that makes you realize you are alone with someone you don't know, far from traffic and city lights. The longer I watched, the stronger the feeling became that being only a few dozen meters from that man was already too close. I had no logical reason to be afraid, but the feeling appeared on its own, natural, urgent, and impossible to ignore. I decided I wouldn't return to my car until that vehicle left, no matter how long it took, no matter how foolish it felt, to wait crouched on a hillside in the middle of the night. So I stayed still, and time moved slower than I expected. Minutes stretched long, the air grew more humid, and the sound of the ocean drifted farther away, while the man remained there, not moving, not showing any sign of leaving. About 15 or 20 minutes passed before something finally changed. From the top of the hill, behind the highway, a light began to move slowly. The headlights of a car. It was the first vehicle I had seen since I stopped. On that road, anyone who had ever driven it knew that if one car moved slowly down the hill, the vehicles behind it would get stuck in a long line. And that was exactly what happened that night. One car appeared, then two, then three, until the line of vehicles grew to 7, descending with a calm, steady rhythm. As soon as the light was strong enough to obscure my position, I got up without a second thought. Time felt incredibly narrow then, just long enough to make a decision, but short enough to feel chased. I ran toward my car, feeling the uneven ground beneath my feet and the cold wind that suddenly felt sharper. The moment the door opened and I slipped inside, I caught one last look at the man's face. His expression had changed, angry, tense, like someone who realized his plan had just slipped away. As the line of vehicles passed, I started the engine and immediately pulled in behind the last car. It felt less like merging onto the road and more like jumping into a moving current. Once I left that empty patch of dirt, the line of cars became an unknowing kind of rescue. Their taillights turned into guides for the entire drive back to Half Moon Bay. The drive back felt longer than usual, maybe because my adrenaline was still there, or because every reflection of light in the rear window made me wonder if that man was following from a distance. But no suspicious car appeared. Nothing overtook me, or trailed behind me. Just the long coastal road, the city lights finally returning, and the slow, creeping sense of relief that settled in after it was all over.